While working at a typical startup as a software engineer, I came across this article, How a Startup Loses Its Spark. And I'm going to give you my take on it and give it a little review. First off, the author, he goes into all these points of what is fun working at a startup when there's less than 10 people. And most of what he writes sounds really individualistic. So it's figuring out what your users want and interviewing them and coming up with features, talking to your coworkers about building such feature. It being amazing that your coworker, since it's a very small company, has skin in the game and is very invested in the success of your feature. You then get to build the feature with your own autonomy real quickly and releases and get some feedback from the users. And this is like a good thing. And I agree, it sounds really nice. And working at a startup myself, I didn't have the pleasure yet of having this experience. And it does sound quite attractive to me. At the same time, maybe the reason it's not so common, at least where I worked, is that usually this means a lot of chaos and not so much focus. Especially in a small startup, usually you would expect that there should be an iron focus on finding out what the product market fit is and what brings in revenue, and you don't really have so much time to play around. You might have time to play around in finding this product market fit with a variety of different ideas, but you can't really waste time. And so you would expect money to be tight at a startup and to be aggressively finding something that helps you grow and survive. And so it would be a really nice surprising perk if you would be able to just randomly come up with stuff to work on. You would expect that the CEO, depending on the size of the company, the CEO or like some PM people, product managers, or like someone you need as a group to have a focus. Someone needs to have to focus the vision, usually the CEO. And then you can maybe challenge it or whatever. But usually based on this, you then have to, as quickly as possible, build an MVP and validate those ideas. But going off on your own ideas like a lone wolf, it sounds super fun, but it seems also, on the contrary, a little bit unrealistic. Or maybe if you're like a 10x engineer or something, it's possible. But in my experiences, it's like difficult to just do this branch out on your own. At the above, the author separates it then into the above 100 people working at the company mark, that it's much less fun. Everything is more abstracted. And in the first part here, the author talks about this idea that everything is abstracted. So you don't talk directly to users anymore. You have a PM who will make user research and they will collect the key points. And if you're lucky, tell you the key points or the structure of what the user research has given them, the insights. If you're in a more normal circumstance, the PM will instead just provide you with some random points of features or goals that should be done for the users that you then have to implement in some way or another. And that this is easy to be skewed because things get lost in translation. Your PM might not be the best to understand the users, but then are you really able to understand your users? Who really is able to understand your users? And the PM will also have their own selfish goals or visions, what they want to do that might be in their own best interest, like having a promotion and thereby pumping out a lot of features or something like this. This, funnily enough, sounds very much like my own experience working at startups. This is the structure I was talking about, and I fully agree. I think it's a bit sad when all this user research stuff gets abstracted away from you and you don't have as much access to it. I think it's really good to have the transparency, and I worked at a company where this transparency was given. Currently, I work somewhere where it's not as transparent, but everything there is a bit chaotic, which is normal for startups, I think. But personally, I don't mind it so much that the PMs hold so much, that there's like this working together with PMs and whatnot. What I found really funny in this article was, however, this passage here, where you have to, you work really long on some feature, 3 months, and then it gets released, and maybe if you're lucky, your CEO gets to see it for like a minute and no one else really cares and nobody really cares. And if it goes great, it will be a benefit to your future performance meeting, and you might get a 20% raise, promotion, and a title, a better title. And this to me is funny because It would be awesome if it was this easy to get a promotion and a title for a 3-month project, no less. So one project and you get a promotion, that sounds super amazing to me. And usually you have to have a track record of like lots good projects and really perform above and beyond. And then you get like a 10% raise or something. Or you change jobs and you can get much more, like 50%, 20, 30%, 10%, whatever. But yeah, I would like to work somewhere where you have to work on one project for 3 months and you get a promotion. That sounds pretty nice. It's pretty cool. However, one thing I really resonated with what he writes is that at the worst case, there's a reorganization in those like a couple of months later after your project, and your manager might get fired, and there's then a new manager that doesn't know you, and you have to prove yourself to them, and they don't know that you worked or did this project or what you have achieved for the company, and you have to convince them that you work, basically. And this to me is hilarious because it sort of happened to me also. I worked really hard in the beginning. I still work hard, but I worked like really, really long hours at my current company, and this helped me then have a trusted relationship with my manager, who I thought was doing a good job and who also listened to me, not fully, but at least he was more approachable. And then he got fired. And obviously the new manager didn't really know what I was doing or what my role was and all this stuff. And my new manager also was like only he was my direct report, but basically before my manager was the CPO, and then the head of engineering was my manager, and then the CPO got fired, and now there's a new CPO. So basically in the power dynamics, there's yet another new leadership figure. As first it was my manager, then my head of engineering, and now it's the CTO. And yet again, one has like, it's not clear if your work will be recognized and whatnot in your achievements. At the same time, usually the company is a working machine, and so you contributing to that working machine and making it run smoothly, people don't really want to mess with this. And so of course you will get leeway, or you will get authority, you will get some say when you build some stuff and you build some recognition and whatnot. And that's how it is. So it's not as dramatic when your manager goes, but it is a bit ironic when you have a relationship with your manager and you put in long hours for the love of the team, basically, so that some feature gets delivered on time or the production outage is not too crazy, and then your manager is gone and all your heroism is forgotten with this to an extent. The author then says that you can't really do much about it. You can only try to slow down the spark being lost at the startup. And you do this by stopping or trying to halt or prevent the processification, which means that some startups, when they grow, hire people that bring their Jira playbooks, their manager playbooks with them, and they try to implement the processes of the big corporations. They try to make processes everywhere, and this will slow down the company a lot and will make the startup lose its spark. This to me sounds super interesting, and also it resonates with me. He also points out that usually the big companies should try to copy the startups, but not the other way around. So big companies will usually try to have like some subsection that acts like a startup and can be agile. So the corporation is copying what the process of the startup. But the other way around, the startup copying the process of the big corp, maybe it's not such a good idea. I've heard the sentiment, the opposite, a lot in my company. So people think that processes are good, and maybe it's true. Maybe too much chaos is not so good. I can see the merit in processes. However, I see definitely that there's oftentimes this push for, okay, let's have a process here. Let's make this more like clean up this stuff. People like to add processes. And sometimes I get a feeling that in the engineering culture, complicated things are added that are not really needed. Like, for example, really complicated Kubernetes setup for like a tiny company, because it might look good on, it's like a shiny tool to use. And there are certainly shiny tools that are great to use, but sometimes those shiny tools might be too complicated, add more complexity, and slow the whole team down, because it's what the big corporations do, it's what Google does, so we should do it too. And the bonus point I want to review from this article is these comments on Hacker News. So I found this article on Hacker News, and the discussion was extremely interesting. And they talk about basically having these sharks. So this one guy writes, or maybe it's a lady, that they were a high-level manager at the company, their job was to hire a bunch of middle managers, and that it's very difficult to detect the people that will do good and the ones that are sharks. And she describes the pattern of how this all works out, that they will be very charismatic and tell you exactly what you want to hear, and that they had the problem that you have had before, and that they've solved it, and they're looking exactly like a company that you have, and they want to fix all these problems. However, then they slowly fuck everything up after you hire them, and they hire their own people into the company, and they build this ring around themselves of their own people. Hardest lesson I learned when I got promoted to upper leadership positions: hiring middle managers is incredibly hard. The numbers of absolute sharks in the candidate pool is wild. People will show up, sense that you're new, and tell you everything you wanted to hear about how they solve all your problems. They claim they've done exactly what you need at every prior company they worked for. They flatter you and tell you they've been waiting for an opportunity to work with someone like you. Imagine the schmooziest internal contributor candidate you've ever interviewed, but 5 times better and harder to see through. These people have charisma you wouldn't believe, but they don't really care to do the hard work. They just want to worm their way into the company and then extract. They'll extract compensation for themselves, extract headcount to hire their friends and build an empire, extract compensation for their friends who will return the favor in the future at a different company, and extract lucrative contracts for their contracting bodies. Years can pass before people realize they haven't really done much despite producing a flurry of activity. They may have even driven away the good employees who got tired of their bullshit or were pushed out for identifying their incompetence. I was lucky to watch this play out under a fast-rising CEO at the lesser-known unicorn. The number of sharks who showed up and charmed him after he became successful was unbelievable. The same thing plays out with less experienced middle managers who get thrust into high-budget positions at smaller companies. And something that smells like this I have also witnessed in my own experience. Mostly it was working with an agency. I will talk about this later at some point. But I joined this current startup, and I was the first internal hire as an engineer, and the groundwork had all been laid out by this external agency. I've never worked with someone so terrible and bad before in my whole life, and also working with some of them intensively as I had to, it was like one of the worst experiences I had professionally. And this is exactly that. They were really good. They were great at selling themselves. So they were fantastic at the politics and talking in the right way to the CPO, who was my manager, and making promises and making really superficial work, churning features out that were very fragile in the underlying system. So when you had to debug things or build on top of it or extend it, it was just terribly written code. And they only put out fires, but it didn't really do any substantial good stuff. And it eroded the code base so that months later it was still broken. After we hired a head of engineering, he then was so shocked by this code that he decided to do a complete rewrite. But that's also a bit controversial and another story. But yes, it's a real thing that I think once a company attracts investment and all this stuff, it is somewhat desperate, or at least a need for people that can help it scale. And then it will attract these sharks that then just try to leech is maybe a strong word, but just try to extract, as this comment points out, just try to extract money and resources from the company while not doing very meaningful things, but selling it like building a rocket for Mars. Did you ever have an experience at your company with something like this? Please leave a comment. It would be very interesting to hear about it. Also, while you edit, please subscribe so that I can justify buying a better camera. I hope this was a bit of an interesting story for you. And I hope you have a really nice day. Bye.